You ever have one of those moments where someone looks you straight in the eye and decides you're beneath them? Not because you did anything wrong, but because in their world, your worth is measured by the car you drive, the watch you wear, or the family name you don't have? Yeah, that night changed everything for me, and for the man who called me garbage. It became $1 billion lesson he'll never forget. The evening started like a scene from one of those glossy business magazines. A rooftop dinner overlooking downtown Chicago. Polished tables. Crystal glasses. Laughter that felt forced. I was there because of Daniel, my boyfriend of 2 years. He was charming, ambitious, the kind of man who looked like he'd been born in a tailored suit. And tonight I was meeting his father, the legendary CEO of Langford Global Holdings, the kind of man who made billion-dollar decisions before breakfast. The kind of man whose smile could ruin careers. His name was Richard Langford. And from the moment he looked at me, I could tell he'd already decided I didn't belong. He didn't even bother to hide it. When Daniel introduced me, Richard's handshake was limp, uninterested. His eyes flicked down to my outfit, a sleek black dress, not designer, then to my shoes. Not expensive enough, apparently. Pleasure, he said flatly. And what do you do, Miss Carter? I smiled politely. I run a technology consulting firm, Stratotech Solutions. He raised a brow. Ah, a startup. The way he said it, like it was a bad word, made the whole table shift uncomfortably. Daniel jumped in. Dad, Ava's company actually just... Richard waved him off. That's nice, son. Then turned back to me. So you're self-made? I am, he smirked. Must be hard. Pretending to keep up in this world. The table went quiet. Even the waiter paused mid-step. And then, as if he hadn't just insulted me, Richard laughed and lifted his glass. To ambition, he said. Even when it's misplaced. That was the moment I decided not to let him see me flinch. I smiled, raised my glass, and said, to men who confuse arrogance for power. You could have heard a pin drop. His wife shifted uncomfortably. Daniel's jaw tightened, but I didn't back down. I held Richard Langford's stare until he was the one who looked away. That dinner was supposed to be my introduction into the elite, world of mergers and money. But it turned into something else entirely. It turned into the spark that would burn an empire. I left early, making up an excuse about an early flight. Daniel followed me out, his face pale. Ava, I'm so sorry, he said. He's just old-fashioned. Old-fashioned? I said, unlocking my car. Daniel, your father called me garbage without using the word. He grabbed my hand. He doesn't know who you are. If he knew your company's behind the Langford merger, I stopped. Wait, he doesn't know? Daniel froze. I wanted to tell him after tonight. You know, once he saw how amazing you are, I laughed. Not out of humor, out of disbelief. So to him, I'm just... What? The pretty distraction his son brought home? Daniel's silence was all the answer I needed. I got into my car and drove off, my chest tight, but not with shame, with clarity. Because what Daniel didn't realize was that the woman his father had just insulted was the same woman whose signature would finalize a billion-dollar merger his empire desperately needed. By the time I got home, my phone was lighting up. Daniel, his mom, even one of Richard's executives trying to smooth things over. I ignored every call. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the deal documents. Langford Global plus Stratotech Solutions. Projected value, $1.02 billion. Projected control, 51% Langford, 49% Stratotech. That 2% difference? It was Richard's idea. He wanted majority control, of course. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I picked up the phone and called my COO, Talia. "It's midnight," she mumbled. "What's wrong?" "Cancel the Langford merger?" Silence. Then she sat up. "Ava, what? We've been negotiating that for 8 months. I don't care." "Terminate it. Immediately," she hesitated. "Do you want me to release a statement?" "Not yet," I said. "Let them find out from their board first." By morning, the story was everywhere. Stratatech backs out of billion-dollar Langford deal. CNBC ran a segment calling it the shock of the quarter. Langford stock plunged 12% before lunch. By noon, my office phone wouldn't stop ringing. First Daniel, then Richard's secretary, then one of their board members practically begging for a meeting. I said no to all of them until the next morning when my receptionist buzzed me. "Miss Carter, there's a Mr. Langford here to see you. He says he won't leave." I smiled. "Make him wait 45 minutes. When I finally walked into the conference room, Richard Langford was pacing. The man who had looked untouchable just 2 nights ago now looked smaller. His tie was loose. His eyes were bloodshot. He turned sharply when he saw me. "Miss Carter." "Mr. Langford," I said evenly, taking a seat. "To what do I owe the honor?" He exhaled heavily. "Let's drop the formalities. What happened last night was regrettable. I may have said some things that were out of line." I crossed my arms. "You mean when you implied I was beneath your family?" He stiffened. "It was a misunderstanding." "No," I said calmly. "It was a revelation." He sat down across from me, lowering his tone. "Look, this merger, our companies both need it. There's too much at stake to let feelings get in the way," I smiled. "You mean your company needs it? Stratatech's doing just fine." His jaw clenched. "This is business, Miss Carter." "No," I said softly. "You made it personal when you decided my value was tied to my background." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You think you can play games with me? You have no idea what you're risking." I stood up. "You're right, Richard. I'm risking nothing. You are." Then I turned to leave. As I reached the door, I looked back and said, "You called me garbage. Now you're the one picking through the scraps." 2 days later, Langford Global's board voted to remove him as CEO, pending strategic review. His empire, the one he built on fear and ego, was collapsing, and I hadn't lifted a finger. Daniel showed up at my office the following week. He looked exhausted, eyes hollow, suit wrinkled. "I saw the reports," he said quietly. "You really did it." "I did," I said. He nodded slowly. "My father, he won't recover from this." "Maybe he shouldn't," I said. "He built his success on crushing people. Maybe it's time he learns what humility feels like." Daniel hesitated. "He was wrong about you. About everything. I want to help fix it." I studied him for a moment. "And lose your family's name in the process?" He took my hand. "Maybe it's time I earn one of my own." For a moment, I saw the boy I'd fallen for, not the shadow of his father. "Then start with this," I said. "Help me build something better." He smiled faintly. "Deal." 3 months later, Langford Global was officially delisted. Their investors had fled. Their reputation shattered. Meanwhile, Stratatech had doubled its valuation, and when Ridgewell Technologies, Richard's biggest rival, called with a proposal, I didn't hesitate. The deal closed at $2.3 billion, twice the value of the Langford merger. When the press asked about it, I said only, "Sometimes walking away is the most powerful move you can make." 6 months later, I was in Florence for a tech summit. The sun was setting over the Arno River, the city glowing gold. That's when Daniel knelt down beside me, a simple ring in his hand. "I don't have my father's empire," he said softly. But I have something better, a future with someone who earned hers. I smiled, tears stinging my eyes. Yes, I whispered. We married the following spring, quietly, away from cameras. Away from boardrooms. Richard never called, but his wife sent flowers, and in a small note, she wrote, "He's learning to live with less. Thank you for teaching him." Now, whenever people ask how I built my success, I smile and tell them the truth. It started with one man's arrogance and ended with his education, because some lessons aren't written in boardrooms, some are written in loss, in humility, in ego shattered beyond repair. Richard Langford called me garbage, but I turned his insult into gold. And that night, the billionaire who thought I wasn't worth his time learned the most expensive truth of his life. Never underestimate the person you look down on, because sometimes the garbage you throw away ends up owning the landfill. If you liked this story, don't forget to hit the bell icon and tell me in the comments where you're watching from.